Welcome to Climate Watch. I'm Ben Tracy. The latest United Nations reports on climate change say the planet is rapidly warming and we need to quickly and dramatically cut fossil fuel emissions to avoid the worst impacts. We want to highlight some ways people at home and around the world are tackling this problem, and some other interesting stories about the nature all around us. We'll take you to a former vice president's Tennessee farm and even to the DMZ between North and South Korea. But first, we start in a small California town that may be the key to the electric vehicle revolution.
Calipatria, California is not a glittering part of the Golden State.
This seems like one of those parts of California that oftentimes people forget about.
It's the forgotten corner of the country. There's a tremendous amount of lack of investment.
State Assemblyman Eduardo Garcia represents this region of Southern California known as the Imperial Valley. His district includes the Salton Sea, the largest inland body of water in California. It's also an environmental disaster zone, loaded with pesticides and heavy metals. As the lake dries out, clouds of toxic dust are causing chronic asthma and other respiratory diseases for the people who live here. But now the race to power all those electric vehicles automakers plan to sell could unlock a new future for this forgotten and forsaken valley.
It's going to create an opportunity to transform the economy.
Underneath the Salton Sea is one of the largest lithium deposits in the world, the lightweight metal that fuels lithium-ion batteries, which make electric cars run and also power everything from our cell phones to power tools. Lithium demand is now so great it's earned the nickname white gold. And this part of California is being dubbed Lithium Valley. The California Energy Commission estimates the Salton Sea could produce 600,000 tons of it a year. That's far more than current world demand, and it could be worth $7.2 billion.
This really could be the future of American energy production.
Absolutely.
Rod Caldwell is the CEO of Controlled Thermal Resources. The company just built this 180-foot-tall rig on the shore of the Salton Sea, the first part of a $500 million project to extract lithium. It is drilling a well 8,000 feet down, where the lithium is found in superheated salt water that can reach 700 degrees inside ancient geothermal reservoirs.
So this lithium has always been here, but nobody really cared about it until now?
We all knew it was here, but at the time lithium wasn't really a market for it.
Are you at a point where as much lithium as you can get, you can sell to an automaker?
Yes, so if we could get more drill rigs like the one in the background going at once, we have customers for sure.
General Motors is making a multi-million-dollar investment in the Salton Sea project to get first dibs on the lithium, as it plans for 30 fully electric vehicle models by 2025. Right now, most lithium comes from evaporation ponds in South America and mines in Australia. Almost all of it is processed in China. The Biden administration says securing a domestic supply of lithium is now a national security issue, so we don't have to rely on other countries for this vital source of energy.
Given this is an American resource, is this lithium going to mainly go to American automakers?
100%.
100%?
100% at this stage.
Caldwell's company plans to build this geothermal power plant that will provide a source of clean, renewable energy along with the lithium. This process has a lot less impact on the environment compared to mining lithium, which consumes a lot of water and leaves potentially toxic residue behind. Just down this dirt road, an existing geothermal plant is switching gears to focus mainly on lithium production.
These things are no joke.
Eric Spomer is CEO of Energy Source. He says when they opened this plant a decade ago, geothermal energy was the focus, and this liquid lithium solution was simply a byproduct.
Well, lithium was not worth very much 10 years ago. So the economics of lithium have really changed the game.
So you have a lot of opportunity here.
Yes, and it's a big place. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of us.
At the Salton Riviera, there is never a let-up in progress.
Opportunity has been promised in this desert for decades.
This unusual city has a date with destiny.
The Salton Sea was created in 1905, when springtime flooding on the Colorado River breached a canal. In the 1950s, it was briefly a playground for the wealthy and well-known. But runoff from nearby farms eventually helped create a toxic stew. eclipsing any hope of a thriving resort destination.
The hype is real.
Eduardo Garcia says this time is different. There's potential for thousands of new jobs and a tax base that could finally help clean up the environmental mess.
You sound excited about this, but oftentimes these companies will just bring in workers from somewhere else, and it does nothing for the people that live here.
That's true. We have introduced legislation to make sure that the workforce comes from here.
And he hopes his neighbors will play a big role in jump-starting America's electric vehicle future.
What we'll see is a community that is far more thriving than what it is right now.
Up next, it's raining fish in Utah. Stay with us. The isolated lakes high in the mountains of Utah are nature at its most spectacular and serene. But as Connor Knighton shows us in a story that first aired on CBS Sunday Morning, replenishing fish stocks in those lakes requires a novel approach.
Misty mountain mornings in northern Utah are sublime. The birds are chirping, the sun is shining, but the far-off hum of a propeller can signal a shift in the forecast. Because in Utah, that sound might mean it's about to start raining fish. Every year, hundreds of remote lakes in the Uinta Mountains get an infusion of fresh fish straight from the sky.
There's nothing that teaches you how to do this.
You don't learn fish dropping in flight school, no?
No.
Pilot Craig Hunt flies a small Cessna stuffed to the gills with thousands of tiny passengers. His job is to get them all to their final destinations, even if there's a floating human in the way.
When the lake's really narrow, I have no choice, and I drop the fish, and I have hit people with the fish.
Do they think it's the end of the world?
No, they think it's pretty cool. It's usually people that are out there fishing.
Putting fish into lakes just so people can take them out of lakes is a strange thing our species does. It happens all across the country. But the terrain in northern Utah presents some special challenges.
Up here in the Uintas, there's 650 lakes that we have fish in, and only a fraction of those that we can access with a vehicle.
Ted Hallows is a hatchery supervisor for the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources. This is where the journey begins for the fish that are stocked in alpine lakes. More than 1 million a year raised at this facility, in trays and tubs and tanks.
And it doesn't take long for them to figure it out.
Lakes near the road can be stocked with a truck. For all the rest, an airplane is actually the easy option.
You know, in the olden days, before 1956, they used to take pack horses with milk cans, and they used to take them all summer to do like 30 or 40 lakes. We can do 50 or 60 lakes in a morning.
It's a process that begins early in the morning, just as the sun is coming up. Hallows and his team measure out loads of trout into specially designed compartments. A set of switches up front controls the drops. The plane can hold around 14,000 fish total. As soon as it's full, it takes off into the mountains, and then the process repeats all morning long.
We're getting 1,200 fish, 10.4 pounds.
Each lake receives a specific allotment of fish.
You don't want to put too many in, because then you're overpopulated and they wouldn't be able to survive. And if you put too few in, then the fishing could fish them out.
These young fish won't be caught for years. Thanks to their small size, they can easily survive the splashdown. Once they're all grown up, they'll look more like this.
I'm happy with that. Thing is fat. So fun.
Getting out to these fish could be just as challenging as catching them. Anglers hike miles into the backcountry.
So what's the furthest you've ever hiked in for a lake?
Oh, sometimes 8 or 9 miles. It should be good.
Hallows and his son Hunter have been fishing together in the mountains ever since Hunter was a boy. During the pandemic, families have flocked to Utah's lakes. The state recently broke its all-time record for fishing license sales. For Hallows, those numbers represent an opportunity to get a new generation hooked. The way he sees it, he's helping stockpile memories.
It's a pretty scenery, it's unbelievable, but if you can take your kid in there and catch trout, that kid will remember that for the rest of his life. We're creating memories for families and kids that they'll never forget.
Coming up, the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea that's become a haven for wildlife. Welcome back to Climate Watch. The demilitarized zone, or DMZ, between North and South Korea is one of the most tense international borders in the world. The threat of war looms, and humans are not allowed. But Elizabeth Palmer shows us that wildlife has found a way to flourish.
On the banks of the Imjin River, biologist Kim Seung looks through his spotting scope and finds what he seeks.
White-necked crane.
White-necked crane, okay. A family of endangered white-naped cranes is feeding nearby. Just across the river is the DMZ, the demilitarized zone that marks the border between warring North and South Korea. Heavily mined and patrolled by troops from the U.S. and both Koreas, it's a no-go area for humans, but a refuge for animals. Like the bird life which thrives in the peace of what's technically a war zone. Almost 70 years ago, the Korean War pitted U.S. and South Korean soldiers against the Chinese. In 1953, the fighting ended in an armed standoff, with the DMZ 160 miles long and 2.5 miles wide as a buffer that has become, as Kim shows me, a haven for all kinds of creatures.
So the military keeps people out of this area because it's an artillery range, basically, which is great for the animals. But I think I just heard a boom. Was that a tank or somebody firing a shell? Yeah? So they're shooting now, not at us.
Kim has been photographing the creatures that live here for years, including the amazing Korean water deer with its vampire-like fangs, rare sea eagles, and shy leopard cats. Kim is on a mission to show Korean high school students how precious wild spaces like this are in heavily developed South Korea.
So I think this is a very rich source that Korea is very fortunate to have.
In 2019, Donald Trump and North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un met in the DMZ. Those talks didn't end the armed standoff, but future ones may well succeed, which could open this pristine area to development. Instead, Kim tells his students and anyone else who will listen, the best monument for peace between the Korean peoples would be a protected home for its animals, a DMZ National Park.
From the DMZ to the wild blue yonder. In a story we first reported last May, Mark Phillips has a look at how electric-powered flight could soon take off.
This one looks like the Red Baron's World War I triplane had too good a time at the party. This one looks like Luke Skywalker might use it on the school run. And this one looks like a flash from the past that doesn't flash very fast. What they're all trying to look like is the future of aviation, because they're all designed to fly on a revolutionary new fuel for airplanes, electricity.
How far are we away from having the holy grail of aviation, an electric airplane?
A full electric airplane is a little way away. The big problem with full electric flights still at this moment in time is power density.
Power density is airplane speak for the fact that when it comes to flying, there's nothing like aviation fuel. It may be polluting, but pound for pound it packs 14 times the punch of any current battery. You couldn't put enough batteries in a plane like this and have it get anywhere. A look around this display of vintage aircraft illustrates the challenge.
In this British Aviation Museum, you can trace the history of aircraft design back over more than a century. But whatever the technological advances, from original biplanes to supersonic, all of these planes used one basic fuel: oil. Now, though, there's a race on to try to change that. This is the baby.
This is the starting point, basically. This is where we're at right now.
Where we are right now is this 19-seater design that Neil Cluffley says will be in the air within 3 years. It's admittedly an interim step, a so-called bioelectric hybrid. Just like a hybrid car, it's jam full of batteries to run its electric motors. But it's also got a little jet engine running on plant-based, not fossil fuel, to provide extra takeoff power and charge the batteries. And according to the designer, it's future-proof.
In the future, as we get to better batteries, we swap out the turbo generator, put that power pack in, the rest of the aircraft stays the same.
Others are trying to go pure electric right now. This 9-seater got a lot of interest at the last Paris Air Show, but it's a risky approach. They're having to design a new model now because the batteries in this one caught fire. The safest approach, though, may be this one. Harbour Air in Vancouver has taken the piston engine out of one of its old seaplanes and put an electric one in. The thing flies, but not very far, which may be okay for a short hop service like this. Scaling up is the problem. The major builders, Boeing, Airbus, are betting on improved biofuel engines, but they come with their own environmental problems. The developers of the new technology say electric planes will be a commercial reality this decade. But there's a saying in radical aviation design: take theory, apply engineering, add miracle.
You might think you know Al Gore, but I got a chance to see a different side of him you might call Farmer Al. That story is next. Former Vice President Al Gore has been sounding the climate change alarm for decades. I visited his 400-acre Tennessee farm to hear what the still passionate and optimistic climate activist thinks about the state of the planet. How big is the farm?
This farm is 400 acres.
Okay. So you got a lot of land.
Former Vice President Al Gore took us for a ride in his electric ATV.
Those are mulberry trees.
To show us his farm where he's been living since the pandemic hit.
I bet most people don't think of you as Farmer Al.
No, I don't think so. And truth to tell, I don't have many calluses on my hands either.
Wait. His team handles most of the farm work, tending to the sheep and raising the animals that help fertilize the land, where they're growing everything from carrots and beets to a variety of greens, all sent to local markets. But this land outside Nashville is also Gore's climate change laboratory.
And then just push it in.
He's collecting a soil sample as he experiments with what's known as regenerative farming.
That means cut back on the plowing. There are better ways to plant.
There's actually 3 times more carbon stored in the topsoil of the earth than all the trees and plants combined. By plowing less and making that soil more fertile, scientists say farmers could help trap massive amounts of additional planet-warming carbon emissions in the ground.
Job number 1 is to stop using the sky as an open sewer for all of this man-made global warming pollution. And that's what's making the weather crazy and dangerous, leading to all of the consequences that are on the TV news almost every night now.
He says Mother Nature is now making the most effective argument for climate action, and he's encouraged by the rapid growth of solar and wind power, and people buying electric vehicles in record numbers. But the planet is still rapidly warming as we continue to pump near record amounts of pollution into the sky, leading scientists to declare a code red for humanity.
There's all this progress being made, but is it enough?
A realist will tell you, look, we've done some damage. Some of it, regrettably, is not recoverable. But we go from where we are. You want to avoid tipping people into despair because some people go from denial to despair without pausing on the intermediate step of actually doing something about it.
It is as if we can throw a switch and save the future of our civilization.
After attending the recent climate conference in Scotland, he says 2022 is the year world leaders need to stop talking and actually start cutting their greenhouse gas emissions.
Some of the pledges are still weak, and we need to measure what they're doing, and we need to keep an eye on them.
It's amazing how precise this is.
Gore is a major investor in a new tech platform called ClimateTrace. It uses satellites, sensors, and artificial intelligence to track greenhouse gas emissions around the globe, from specific power plants and factories.
This is the Middletown Steel Works in Butler County, Ohio.
To individual cargo ships and even forests, which release all of their stored carbon when they burn. Gore believes this will be an important tool to hold countries accountable for their pollution.
What do you do with that data?
Publish it. We're not the climate cops. We're maybe the neighborhood watch, but our neighborhood is the whole world.
We're in constant communication with the scientific community.
Al Gore has been sounding the climate alarm for more than 4 decades. First as a young congressman.
The Arctic is experiencing faster melting.
And then 15 years ago with his planetary PowerPoint in the film An Inconvenient Truth. It earned him an Oscar, a Nobel Peace Prize, and plenty of scorn from climate change deniers.
Some people called you a kook for, being too far left on the environmental stuff. In a kind of unfortunate way, do you feel like what you have been saying all along has been validated?
Well, I certainly wish I had been wrong. And more to the point, what I've been saying is really just channeling what the scientific community has been saying.
At the top of the film, you say, I've been trying to tell this
story for a long time, and I feel as if I've failed to get the message across.
Do you now feel like you've succeeded in getting the message across?
No, I have not succeeded yet. The crisis is still getting worse faster than we're deploying the solutions. There is a remaining question about whether we will solve it in time.
He's still optimistic, mainly because of young people all over the world now demanding change.
A lot of those young people seem pretty fed up with politicians.
Yeah, blah, 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 as Greta says.
Exactly.
And I'm with her.
We're sick and tired of it, and we're going to make the change.
Greta Thunberg and her fellow climate activists accuse world leaders of not doing nearly enough. And this former politician doesn't want them to tone down their criticism.
I want them to, in the words of Spinal Tap, I want them to turn it up to an 11.
Feet to the fire.
Absolutely. And the more they can march, the more noise they can make, the more demands they insist upon, the faster progress we'll make. I'm a firm believer in that. I call this a farmer-led movement.
And he still believes the climate crisis we created is one we can also solve.
The direction of travel is clear, and I do believe that we will get there.
For more stories like these and live coverage of breaking news 24/7, stream us right here on CBS News, available across all platforms. Thanks for watching Climate Watch. I'm Ben Tracy.